Welcome back to Curse, Code, and Crown, a live play Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition podcast featuring a fully original world and campaign. I am the wizard Cronox, observer of time. Curse, Code, and Crown features our regular voiceover artists and improvisers, Laura Elizabeth as the Orcountant Eta, Tyler Hewitt as Makka Deathcap, and Ryan LaPlante as Duncan Danno, alongside our dungeon master, the incredible Tom McGee. So get ready for an adventure including thrills, chills, and hope for a brighter tomorrow. It's time for Curse, Code, and Crown!
The day of the trial is upon us. Makka Deathcap is to be tried for the betrayal of Presidentia Umos, First Blade, Chestnut Kell, and the disaster that occurred in Orvel, not to mention the curse that has befallen the people of Bleen. Luckily, the turtle who left his swamp in search of answers and help has found some friends along the way. Duncan Danno of the Dawnbreakers, Princess Gwendolyn of Orvel, and of course Eta, the orc accountant, who is desperately trying to figure out and uncover the conspiracy occurring in the Empire of Numbers, along with their trusty, quote, trusty lawyer, Murdoch Truegood. The five of you head to the trial. Is there anything you would want to do before you go?
I'd be curious to know, Tom, if I received any benefits to sleeping in terms of
yes, we can
slots or anything
count
like
that a long rest. You can have everything back.
I can't
that's nice.
necessarily cast spells depending on where I am, but I have a feeling, it's not just going to be, yes, court is adjourned and we were wrong. You were right, Makka. Goodbye.
It could be. Anything's possible when you use your imagination.
Yeah.
I do feel like I'm watching one of those movies where you're like, he's obviously innocent. Like, come on. Why are these people so stupid? Anyways.
I think Duncan will have had to stitch up his clothing again, because he definitely got the shit stabbed out of it fighting Eisenhorn El Ravan. So he'll have done his weird stitch work, making his leather patchwork sexy quilt of clothing back to 100% like the rest of them.
Yeah, I feel like at this point, it's not so much that you're having to repair new rips and stabs. It's like the stitching on your previous stitch-ups has been cut. So weirdly, you're like repairing the repair job, not the base material anymore.
Yeah, it's very Edward Scissorhandians.
Nice.
It's a really good term, and I like it.
That's
it's
great.
Scissorhandian. Oh yeah, very good. Oh yes. Overly maudlin with a slight fantastical edge. Yeah, oh, very nice. Great. Eta, is there anything you would want to do?
I mean, I think Eta's more just kind of like ruminating. She doesn't really have any more information, right? Like
No, for sure.
available
I was
to
just
her
curious.
right now. So I think she's kind of like, I guess there's not much for me to do at this trial. I mean, I contemplate my people.
Yeah, I feel like in a lot of ways, Eta is kind of in a ride share with the rest of the party, where it's like she's happy to see them get there on time, but like she's also going places on her own. So yeah, that tracks.
And like everyone else is kind of having a conversation and she's not really part of it. So she's kind of like looking out the window, thinking of her own stuff.
Yeah, fair enough. And is there anything Gwendolyn would do?
I think Gwendolyn's, I think she's feeling pretty okay. I mean, she trusted Lady to support. Oh, I can't remember her name. Sorry.
Murdoch?
No, the other. Yeah, Darn. She's like, no, people are gonna come through.
Oh, I see. Yes. Gotcha.
So no, I think she's more like, oh, let's also just be aware because things might go to shit. So
Oh, yeah, I was going to say Duncan's biggest concern is the fact that Darna mentioned in passing that Murdoch Trugood had never won a case, which was a bit of a red flag to overhear, but not something he could fix. So he's just decided he kind of has to throw some faith into this.
I forgot about that.
Duncan didn't. He's a little haunted by it, but they don't have any other allies or options. So he has not told anyone else because he doesn't want to scare anyone, but it's in his head.
Well, just The Simpsons. Why do we keep hiring him? I forget what the context was. We literally walked in and he's like, I rest my case. And they're like, wait, you didn't ask any questions. And he's like, objection. And they're like, you shouldn't have hired this man. All right, great. Okay, so with that, you make your way to the courtroom. So you find yourselves in a large court that, again, as you've seen through the rest of the imported city, is constructed of a variety of materials. In this case, they all seem to be different kind of depictions of justice. Duncan, you're actually very struck by this on, I think, a very deep level, despite all the fears and concerns you have right now, because it is truly beautiful, and it is humbling in a way to see something that, when although the parts are all very disparate, ultimately adds up to kind of what it's I think the first time you've literally seen your conception of justice, which is just the various depictions of justice and sort of judicial process from around Gren all in one place. This should theoretically be pretty much as close to a church as I think you would be able to find to justice. Of course, it's tainted by the fact that you're well aware that the systems supporting this are a mess and corrupt. But there's a purity in the idea, at least, that quite appeals to you. In modern terms, it would kind of be like if you walked up to a courthouse and they had like the sort of very traditional Western blindfolded justice holding a scale and a sword, but then also depictions of justice from around the world. So you kind of have a one-stop shop for justice. Yeah. It's a much more complex sentence, much more tongue twistery than I thought, like Scissor Handian, So you make your way sort of up the steps to this, and you notice that the steps are inscribed both not on the part you step on, because that would just fade away too quickly, but on the kind of outward facing part of the steps with names of there's sort of two different flights of stairs going up with kind of a banister in the middle. To the left, the names of the innocent; to the right, the names of the guilty. But just a real sort of visual depiction of kind of the process. There are a number of citizens of Blean that have come out to see the trial. You get the sense that, given how badly Makka has been scapegoated, this is rather large news, and people are attracted. But over and above that, the sort of three core members of our group have been very visible throughout Blean over the past few days, and people have taken note of your actions. So as a result, there is a tremendous amount of interest. Makka, this is a lot more pomp and circumstance than you ever want anywhere forever. But now that you know to look for it, you see signs of Indara-based product everywhere. You can see everything from the makeup that I believe we described Darna wearing, but that you recognize from the Root Folk, the Sundara product. But you also see people shimmering that have a spore glow around them that you would recognize as like a bioluminescent that you can activate. But this isn't that sort of sweet, natural, natural. It seems very unnatural, but that like neon green glow that bioluminescence gives off. This is golden and shimmering. It's visually beautiful, but you can tell the result. Now that you're looking for it, you're very easily figuring out how all these things work. So it's like, yes, if you were to inject a pigment into bioluminescence and find a way to artificially charge it, this would be the result. But it means that it's not a natural process. It's a wildly artificial thing being run through a natural process. Be like injecting a neon dye into a creature's bloodstream so its veins would look cooler. Like you can see how produced all of this is. Duncan, can you roll me are you a perception or an insight guy when you're trying to suss out a crowd? Streetwise would probably be fine too, but that doesn't exist in this game. So
yeah, I think
investigation might be fine.
Probably insight on the scale of things, because I think he does have the training, but the trick is to be able to narrow it down based on his gut after the training.
Well, and also again, it's turtles, so emotion reads much differently on their faces than on human faces. Equally expressive, just in a way that you're less familiar with.
It's a 7.
You're having a hard time telling what the general vibe is here, other than interest. So the interest is clear, but you can't tell whether it's like people looking on being like, he's innocent, this is a travesty, he's guilty, I want to watch him hang. Like, you know, like the sort of like crowd outside the courtroom. It's hard to get a vibe.
It's a really funny image to me, and be like, Chuck could just be like, there's interest here.
Well, he's just looking around, and there's just a lot of turtles chanting words he doesn't understand and waving signs he can't read, who seem very adamant about whatever their opinion is.
Oh yeah, there's
great side it's on.
There's great passion, no matter what. You just have no idea what that passion is geared towards. As a brief aside, I went and saw Face Off at the Bell Lightbox TIFF Theater as part of a John Woo retrospective. And we, of course, laughed our way through the whole thing because it's Face Off, and had a great time. And at the end of it, there's a really nerdy film guy next to me. He's like, so I can't tell. Do you guys like this movie? And we're like, fucking yeah, man. But it's also Face Off. Like, if you're not laughing at like face waterfall bullshit, you're doing it wrong. So I feel like it's kind of that, where it's just like, Duncan is that film guy just being like, but it's John Woo, I should respect this, without paying attention to like Nick Cage being Nick Cage. It's so hard to tell what the intent is, but you know there's a lot of intent. Gwendolyn, what would your track be? Also, yeah, don't treat fucking Face Off as like a masterpiece of cinematography and film. Like, get out of here.
But it is.
Face Off, and I don't think it's that funny. I think it's amazing. But let's continue.
Yes, but like laughing in enjoyment, not in like this is dumb, but like
I don't knock anyone else laughing at it, but I don't laugh. I just love.
Fair enough. So welcome to Curse Code.
This is a different podcast. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, we've just pointed out that Duncan is Ryan and Ryan is Duncan. So this metaphor continues.
Yeah, absolutely. From the makers of it's just garbage channel. Laura, what's Gwendolyn doing?
Gwendolyn is, I mean, I think she's kind of like, they have to, I mean, okay, there's an awareness that like she's going to need these people. Mm-hmm. We're going to need these people at some point. So I think there's kind of, she's paying attention because she also wants to be prepared to like defend Makka if like things go wrong. But I think she's just kind of like nodding at people, kind of like doing kind of like, hello. Yep. Nice to be here.
You're not doing like the royal wave. You're actually like doing a real person wave.
No, she's trying to be like overly friendly, like, hi. Person here, like just like you, we're all alike. Like there's kind of that kind of vibe. She's not saying those things. Hello, person. You and me, we're not too different. You and I, like.
Yeah, you're not a Bond villain.
No.
Cool. So I guess then my follow-up question would be: normally, Gwendolyn, your kind of modus operandi with these situations has been to ascertain whether the people you're working with would be a good fit for the Alliance of Equals, or if the people you're going to supplant them with would be a good fit for the Alliance of Equals.
Yeah.
Where are you at on that front with Bleen right now?
I think it entirely depends upon the outcome of this trial, because if essentially if they're the kind of people that's going to like throw Makka under the bus, then they're not deserving of a place at the table.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
Unless there's like, like a group of them who are like not part of the justice system, who are like, but like we're, it's like we're cool. Like them, if there's anyone like that.
Yeah, like if there's a turtle named Karen who seems real nice, she can invite him into her armor.
Thanks, Ryan.
I also just like the idea that you would allow someone who's like, I'm real cool. It's like, oh, well, you're the person I want to bring into my alliance wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. So yeah, it's a determine whether you'll poison the pool or like poison the well by bringing these folks in. So yeah. Okay. So that's good to know. That's an additional set of stakes, I think, for Gwendolyn, which is like, yeah, obviously we've got to figure out if we can save Makka, but over and above that, are these people worthy of being an equal in an alliance? Because honestly, the way you've set it up, if anyone is an asshole, everyone's in deep trouble.
Yeah. And it's not in the sense of them like being lesser, but it's more of the worry that like, oh, they could like take over.
Exactly.
Or they could, they
could
get too big for their britches and stomp all over everyone else.
Yeah, those famous turtle pants that we always talk about. Yeah. No, I love that. Okay, that's great. So with that, all of that kind of context, with sort of weighing you down, the three of you plus Ida and Murdoch make your way into the actual courtroom. This is one of the few times where you've seen this a few other places, but where it does seem to be uniquely turtle architecture once you're inside. In here, it is that old, as we talked about, sort of that old carved wood vibe. So large round space with kind of a central pillar, a little off center for the judge, and sort of carved little alcove booths for the accused and the prosecution. You can see that there are sort of that classic gladiatorial arena style seating above the actual courtroom. So rather than having people seated down on ground level, they're all kind of up in a sort of raked seating looking in and down. And people are filtering in from outside, but generally speaking, it's already packed. And you notice, Duncan, I think you'd probably be the first to notice this. The people in those seats are clearly like the high end of the merchant class. So bedecked in finery. Everyone outside seemed a little bit more rank and file, but these guys all remind you much more of Wajdi and his kind of merchant class of people who are the beneficiaries of a lot of the work that happens here. Which isn't surprising to you because that's often how courts end up shaking down. All the high society gets to show up and everyone else gets to stand outside and just be told what justice was, and it's fine. Gwendolyn and Duncan, you are separated from Makka along with Ida and kind of brought to, there's a bench not up in the upper parts, but kind of along the wall for like close supporters and counsel that aren't the lawyer and the accused. So you're still on ground level with them, but you're not like up there. And similarly, across the way, you can see the prosecution kind of taking their seats along with some other dignitaries along the side, directly behind the judge, but very clearly in your line of sight, in almost like one of those little emperor balconies, is Vice Presidentia Cleon Rootback, along with Second Blade Tamlin Deepcry, who are presiding over it. Duncan, from a quick glance from you, like, this is one of those classic, like, well, here's the judge, but here's the judge's boss and the executioner. So very, very consciously in the view line. You can see though that Cleon looks slightly uncomfortable in the position. It hasn't been realistically that long since the incident at Orville in the greater scheme of things. So there's definitely a bit of that unease that comes with being the vice president who is suddenly thrust into the limelight. But he does seem pretty, like he's giving off an air of like, yes, I'm here. But you can tell there's he's presenting that, but there is no bearing of authority coming off of him, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. Ginkgo Longleaf, the ambassador, is sitting nearby. He's got one of those like Grecian, like ancient Greece had these like when they drink wine, it was out of these like long, like basically almost think like a platter with a stem. So he's drinking wine off one of those. So just this big fucking flat goblet, and is talking to some courtiers who are kind of over his shoulder and like laughing at his jokes in a very sycophantic way. The prosecution comes in and is improbably wearing a classic British like barrister's wig. So like the sort of curled wig, though it's made of natural materials, so of sort of twigs and vines and that sort of thing. He's a fairly bookish looking turtle. He's got a little like parsnip on the edge of his nose, and is doing that somewhat bumbling thing that only like lifelong academics can really pull off, kind of like fumbling some scrolls and that sort of thing. Has a couple of eager aides who are like cleaning them up and delivering them. That said, despite the kind of bumbling demeanor, has an air of absolute comfort in this room. Like there's no hint of nervousness. There's bumbling, but it's not like, oh no, I'm worried. It's literally just, I have no coordination. But in a way that is somewhat unsettling, because he is walking into this place like it's just a day at the office for him, which isn't great. Murdoch, meanwhile, is sweating more than a turtle ought to. She is constantly dipping her hand into a bowl of ice and water, trying to like calm down. But no, she's an awkward looking turtle. All the flash and pizzazz is doubled because she is clearly very nervous. And Dennis, of course, is cool as a cucumber because that's how Dennis rolls. As you're all seated, the judge enters. Hazel Kell, the wizened turtle judge, wearing a almost like a long scarf of authority wrapped around her neck several times over. You can see, I think Ita would probably be the one to notice this. There are verdicts stitched in at every line. So at a distance, it kind of looks like a cross thatch, but with your eye for detail, you can see that all the verdicts she's passed are represented somewhere on this. And it's a long fucking scarf. She's been at this for a long time. So
what's the guilty, not guilty
you
ratio?
Can't tell. Can't read from this distance. You can just see that it's clearly like the judgments that have been passed. You're unable to tell. And actually, I would say you're also uncertain if the purpose is to indicate whether it is guilty or not guilty, or whether the purpose and intent is just to remind the judge of the weight of their decisions, one way or the other. So she comes in and picks up a small ancient, what looks like not a turtle, but a turtle shell, and claps it against the hollowly against the podium, bringing quiet to the room. And she says, yes, we are here now to determine the fate of a notorious figure in our community. You cast a long shadow, Makka Deathcap, former gravekeeper of Bleen. But today we shall determine the nature of your legacy and what you mean to us and our people. Do you stand prepared to defend yourself?
I do.
Yes. And she looks to Murdoch and says, and you, Counsel Truegood, are you prepared to assist your client in the defense of his very being? And Murdoch just raises a hand and says, Your Honor, my client has suffered a grave injustice at the hands of, and Hazel is like, yes, enough. I will take that as a yes. You may save your spiel for the trial. And then she turns to the prosecution and says,
Mowgli, Bark Sheath, are you prepared to bring the argument of the people of Bleen?
and he just pushes his glasses up his nose a little bit and says,
Yes, Your Honor, I am very prepared to bring the case of the people of Bleen against Makka Deathcap. Yes, it would seem that justice must be served here today, and I am happy to assist in any way I can.
And you see, Duncan, this pisses you off to no end. You see a slight softening of the judge's features because he clearly said exactly the right things, whereas dear sweet Murdoch definitely said exactly the wrong things. And with that, the trial is underway. Makka, would you want to present your case first, or would you like the case against you to be presented?
Probably the case against me. See what I'm truly accused of and why.
Cool. So the jury, I should mention, is cloistered behind the judge. So kind of over the judge's shoulders. Unlike kind of our modern courts in North America here, where you're kind of off to the side, you can almost see there's a downplaying of the judge's importance to the jury in the hopes that the jury will focus more on the defendant and the prosecution. So with that, Mowgli steps up. And as soon as he gets out in front of the judge into kind of the little speaking area, you can see a lot of that bumbling kind of fall away. And he says,
in my experience, honored members of the Consortium of Bleen, it is often better to experience something than to hear a humble turtle like myself speak of it. And so, in considering the matter of Makka Deathcap, accused of impersonating an ambassador to Sprongbreck Fortress and possibly, and I can't say for sure, but what shall we say, probably ruining our trade relationship with them indefinitely, to poisoning our very way of life through all manner of sneaky potions, and of course bringing the blight that now affects us so terribly. I could tell you of these things, but perhaps the dead can speak louder than I.
And he turns and gestures to the door, and a couple of worker turtles come in, pulling sort of two-wheeled wagons, sort of like rickshaws, piled with corpses into the courtroom. Now they aren't huge, obviously. They're it's a turtle, so they're large. But we can say there's probably about between 5 and 6 bodies on each one. They're not a massive stack, but it's very much like a ring, bring out your dead kind of deal. And you can tell that unlike the bodies you saw at Makka's hut, these have actually been not embalmed, but given that kind of treatment. You can smell perfumed oil on them. They've been cleaned up. They're wearing finery. They're very carefully stacked. They've clearly been treated as well as one can treat a corpse that refuses to rot. So he wheels these 2 carts up, and he kind of just gestures to the workers, who just kind of dump them out into the center of the floor, and the corpses kind of tumble over each other into a pile. And he looks down at them and he says,
"This turtle claims to be the grave keeper of Bleen, and yet, when we needed him most, he turned his back on us and our beloved Presidentia Umos, and instead has cursed us with this: our bodies will never rot. Our spirits will never transcend. He is not a grave keeper. He is a robber of death, and I implore you to find him guilty on all counts."
Ryan,
Duncan lets out a big sigh of relief, and he just turns to Gwendolyn beside him and he goes, "This is so much better. I was really worried he was going to do necromancy, and I think I would have been honor bound to kill him."
Yeah, I kind of thought that's where they were going too. This is like, also, why is no one objecting? Why are there no objections here? Like that, even I know that language was like super emotional.
Yeah, this is the problem. You may have noticed at the beginning that guy knows exactly what to say that the judge likes, and Murdoch Trugood has a good speech worked out that seems to be unrelated to being a lawyer. So I think it's going to come down on our side to who starts ranting first.
And I think
the attempted lawyer or the turtle.
Ida cuts in too, being like, I also do not understand why like the judge is wearing the thing with all like the verdict on it, and yet the jury seems more important. Should the weight of it not be on the jury then? This is very confusing. I do not understand.
So your problem is that they didn't make scarves for the jury?
No, that they're showing that the weight is on the judge, but the weight seems to be on the jury, and yet it should be on both. It should be on everyone, no?
Here, do you know what? I've got this book for you. Why don't you write down your thoughts in here?
Also, the fact that guilty has fewer letters, so it would literally be less weighty with more guilty verdicts. This is very confusing.
All right. So,
I like trail off as I start writing it down.
yeah. I imagine you're still talking, but it's like you do that thing where you're like talking, but also running. You're like, yes, and it's very confusing, and it is very confusing, and like it just turns into script.
Yeah,
so it's just a pure transition. There's no blip.
When she looks to Duncan with a new idea, he just lifts the book up in front of where his face is, and she starts writing again, and he lowers it down so she can like focus on that.
Makka, what you're sitting aside from them again. You're in kind of like a little alcove that's been carved, almost like I think like a tiny band shell that's been carved up and out of the ground. So you don't have line of sight on them. You can't actually hear them. All of your kind of auditory experience is aimed directly at the judge and the opposing counsel. So you can hear some muttering, but it's unclear to you because of kind of the wooden structure behind you. So you're kind of weirdly in your own little like noise canceling space. Okay. What's going on for you as you hear this opening argument and the delivery of the bodies?
I don't think Makka has the full grasp of how a trial is supposed to go, really. But he's hearing these claims made against him, and I think he's just taking an internal inventory of how he would refute those if he's being asked to. He's also probably glancing over at Murdoch to kind of get an idea of what's supposed to happen next.
Right. So Murdoch pulls her hand up out of the cold the cold pool to try and bring her temperature down, and just kind of shakes it off and says, "These things never work." They tell you, you're cold blooded. This is what you need, and it doesn't do a fucking thing. Useless. Okay, great. And she strides purposefully out, leaving Dennis behind. Just sort of strides out into the space and says, "Gentle turtles of the jury, esteemed judge, esteemed counsel, and assorted hangers-on. My client, Makka Deathcap, is many things. He is a turtle. He is a healer. And she pauses for effect, he is innocent. So I ask you, all of you here today, to ask yourselves, what do you think he is? Because I've just told you. He's a turtle. He's a healer. And then she does a full The Rock, like spins her hand around and puts it up next to her ear hole and starts like gesturing to the crowd. And there's like nothing, just dead silence.
Innocent.
That's right, everyone. You got it. He is innocent. So I ask you, and she just like points wildly at the jury, to consider deep down inside your hearts what that means. Because to me, if you're innocent, it means you shouldn't have to pay for the crimes that you did not commit. That's what it means. In closing, My client, and Makka, you're just like, you're watching this thinking like this. I guess this is how trials
How
go.
it goes.
Says, my client has but one important thing to say to you that you need to hear before you consider the rest of this. We don't have flashy bodies to dump because my client is innocent and has nothing to do with that. So we don't have props. We just have the truth. So I ask you, will you heed the words of an innocent man or the flashy propaganda of this guy? And she points to, like, again, the very austere, like, clearly knows what he's doing turtle, who does kind of take this, and he kind of like he's giving like a Kermit the Frog giving you the time of day, kind of like at it. But then also kind of turns to the jury in a very like, yeah, who do you trust right now kind of way. And of course you all can see them like kind of looking at him and looking back at Murdoch and looking at the bodies and kind of like muttering to each other. Says, all right, so without further ado, Makka, Deathcap, innocent man, what do you have to add? Tell him, Makka. Tell him how innocent you are.
And Gwendolyn just like whispers to Duncan, like, oh God, she has no idea what she's doing.
Yeah, this is why we sort of had to, shall we say, leverage the jury.
Looking to the jury, you do. It would seem that for all of her other faults, she wasn't wrong. Half are very clearly like doing like very classic like bad extra in Law and Order episode, like crossing their arms and shaking their heads, like clutching their little turtle pearls. The other half are kind of like just so vexed by everything that's going on. You can tell they don't necessarily think he's innocent, but they also don't necessarily think dumping a bunch of corpses in the middle of the room is like a good argument. But sure enough, so far at least, Wajdi, Phaedron, and Darna are staying just completely blank, which you take kind of as a good sign because they don't need to perform anything because they're already bought. But Makka, you are brought forward to speak in your own defense. What do you do?
All right. I, like Tyler, am actually nervous.
I having played a role in a court case before on another show, I empathize completely.
All right.
Makka
So
will.
Tyler, take a deep breath. Makka, take a deep breath.
Yeah.
And then you step forward to deliver your defense.
This episode of Curse Code and Crowd Sound was mixed and edited by Laura Hamstra, and the campaign was created by Tom McGee. Our original theme music was composed by Landon Knoblock, and Curse Code and Crown's logo was created by the brilliant Decapitated Markers. If you want to follow our players or our DM on Twitter, you can reach out to Laura at EL Hamstring, Ryan at the Ryan LaPlante, Tyler at Tyler_Hewitt, Tom McGee at McGeeTD, or you can message our whole company at Dum Dum Dice. So please join us again for more Curse, Code, and Crown!
Dum Dums and Dice has to give a special thank you to the supreme beings of our Patreon at this time: Christian Menicola, Long, the Half-Blind Prophet, James Cuellar, Charles Grams, Christopher Little, Sue One, George Dolby, One True Artistry, Orion Birchfield, Lord of Bradovic, Noel Lewis, Scott Garland, Anthony Griffin, Chet Awesome Laser, Jordan Neesmith, Benjamin V, Gavin and Abby McDonald, Taryn Hefner, Cade Peters, Richard Cranium, Christian Mendez, Anna Zed, Eric Williams, Logan, Fire Unfriendly, Great Dane, Acrix, Cameron Ezel, Grandma Likes D&D, and Jill and Noel LaPlante. If you want your name to be added to this list, you can join our Patreon too at patreon.com/dumdumdice. Thanks to them, and a little bit of thanks to you.